Hey there, listeners. Welcome to Seek Travel Ride, where we share inspiring stories of incredible bike adventurers from all around the world. I'm your host, Bella Malloy, and I'm thrilled you're tuning in. This episode is brought to you by Old Man Mountain, trusted bike racks built for adventure. Whether you're hitting rugged trails or cycling across continents, Old Man Mountain racks carry your gear with unbeatable durability. They're engineered to fit any bike, they're designed to handle heavy loads and tough terrain, which makes them a perfect choice for your bike adventure. So if you're feeling inspired hearing our guests' stories and now looking to gear up for your own bike tour, Old Man Mountain has your back. Visit oldmanmountain.com and discover how their racks can make all the difference on your adventure.
I came to the border in the evening, and then I was like super happy and excited. I'm like, yes, I made it. And then the Russian border police, he looked on my passport, and then he's like, "Oh, visa," and I gave him like a copy of the electronic visa that I printed out, and he's like, electronic visa, нет, like no, and I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, here you have to have the proper visa. You cannot go with electronic visa. And I'm like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah, either you have to fly into Kazakhstan or you have to go back where you come from, because that's one of the only borders you can go out with an electronic visa. I was too hungry. I was too tired to like cry or nothing. And it's no purpose to talk against the Russian border police either.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello, I'm your host, Bella Malloy, and I'm thrilled to welcome my guest for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, Marielle Jauring. Marielle has spent the last several years experiencing the world from the saddle of her bicycle, and her touring CV is impressive, to say the least. Listeners, her journey began way back in 2017 when she cycled across the United States. She covered over 9,000 kilometres on that trip in just under 90 days. Since then, Marielle has ridden huge distances across countries like Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. She's navigated her way from Sweden to Austria during the height of the pandemic, and then also travelled extensively throughout Europe and Asia. I'm speaking to her today while she's currently midway through another bike adventure, cycling from Poland all the way to Sri Lanka. I cannot wait to hear Marielle's stories of navigating continents on two wheels, the experiences that have shaped her perspective, and the unique challenges that she's faced along the way. Listeners, I'm sure we're also going to get into what it's like to take a bike tour with your twin, how her travels have evolved over the years, and the insight she's gained into life, endurance, and, of course, adventure. Marielle Jauring, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bella. Very, very nice to be here.
I am super excited for this chat, Marielle. Listeners, this episode has been a few weeks in the making and our schedules just haven't synced quite right. But we've got you now midway through your next big journey, and I cannot wait to think of the stories you're going to come out with during our session. But Marielle, a question which I start my show with, and I ask it of all of my guests, is, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
Yeah, I think that's at my grandma's place when, I mean, I don't know if you can call it riding a bike, but when you had those like three-wheeled bikes as a kid, yeah, they were like really tiny, and we were always riding them around her little garden. She was a farmer, and then we put like cats and ducks and small like pigs in the back of that little bike because it had some kind of a, what do you say, like a little space where you can put things in the back of the bike. So I think that's like the first kind of memory of a bicycle, if I think back on it.
All I'm thinking there, Marielle, is you didn't know it at the time, but you were giving yourself the experience of, touring with luggage from such a young age.
Exactly.
Oh, what a cool adventure there on the farm. I've never been to Sweden, Marielle, but I have learnt that the outdoors and spending time in the outdoors is something that's in Swedish culture. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And especially for me, because I grew up with my mom and my twin sister. So we are like a super, super girly family. I didn't meet my dad until I was like 25. So, of course, as a single mother, I mean, it struggles when it comes to the financially sometimes. Our family, we are very rich in like love and doing activities together. So my mom, she always brought us out. Like every weekend, we went cross country skiing or like ice skating on the lake or just hiking and walking. And we never had a car till I was like 20 because she couldn't afford one. So we biked everywhere. And we didn't really have like super good bikes either, but I think that's where everything started. And that's where like my mind came from that if you want to go somewhere, you just do it on a bicycle. And she picked us up from kindergarten. Then she had this little trolley behind her bicycle and she put us in it. Yeah, we always been like super, super active. And then when I got older, I got more into like snowboarding, which kind of formed my whole life. So it took me to places and stuff. But in Sweden in general, I think people are just very outdoor people, and we like going picking mushrooms in the autumn or cloudberries and picking blueberries. It's a lot of picking berries. I think that makes people.
I live for food. It's right up my alley. I love foraging for food. In fact, where I live in the Pyrenees in France, my neighbour has been teaching me a little bit about mushrooming and mushroom varieties. So,
Yeah,
bit of a tangent, but a month or so ago, I picked my first, in French, we call it cep, which is like a porcini mushroom, which is like a prized find. So I was really proud of myself for that. But you've been doing this since you were just as natural, just growing up?
yeah. No, like that was like the start of my life. Like we just been outdoor all the time, and sometimes like if you come from a background where it's maybe not so much money, I mean then the nature is your playground. You can do so much stuff out there, so you don't need to go to this like expensive playing centers or whatever they call them for kids. Like I think nowadays when I'm looking back, it's all I have so many like good memories from that time when we were sitting like barbecuing like sausages in the spring on the frozen lakes. Just spending time together, and yeah, I cherish those moments like pretty well now when I'm a little bit older.
Yeah, and it's really formed you into the person that you are now and the life that you're leading now as well, because the outdoors has to play a huge role in your personality for you to continue to just be outdoors in the elements, experiencing nature at its full throttleness on a bike tour, right?
Yeah, 100%. And when I'm outdoor, that's when I feel like home. That's more my like natural habitat, I would say. And sometimes when people have a comment about like, oh, but isn't it like tiring staying in a tent or isn't it hard? Like I love it. It's like coming home for me. So I just enjoy it, and sometimes I can miss like being in my tent if I stayed in many. Like when I biked around Australia, for example, then pretty much from Sydney up to Noosa, I have so many friends since I did winter season back in Austria. So I stayed with people like all the time, and it was like warm shower hostess, and it was super lovely, and I'm so happy I met them. But I felt like after a while, I got really tired in my head because every time you come home to someone, I mean, of course they want to know about your journey, but you felt a bit like you were on repeat. And sometimes when you had a big day on the bicycle, sometimes it's just nice to crawl into your tent and not talk to anyone and just lay there being dirty and, and tired, I think.
I've had a guest say that to me before. I think it was Jude Crywald. Hi, Jude. And he was saying after the hardest day, one of the places where he felt most at home and safe was in his tent. Like he could get into his tent, zip it up. It was his little cocoon, and he could just be himself, away from anything, just be with his thoughts and things. And that's sort of similar to what you're saying. You're not on show. You don't have to entertain anyone.
Exactly.
It's the equivalent of like being in your bedroom and just being your own company, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's just a nice feeling. I love being outdoor and in my tent, and I feel like safe there. And that's not always the case when you're in a town or around humans. So for me, that's my like safe spot as well.
I have to ask then, Do you try and navigate through cities and be in cities as least as possible then on a tour? Or do you also enjoy discovering a city?
I'm not a super big fan of big cities, and I have never been. The same like in Sweden. Stockholm is the capital in Sweden, and my twin sister, she used to live there, and I was fine for like 2 or 3 days, but then I need to get out of it. And I'm the same with the bicycle. I think it's fun to explore a city to a certain like extent, but not like super much. It can be nice for a day or two, but I'm not a person that runs around to museums and wanna see everything in a town. Like then I'm way more interested in seeing like nature or animals and like more natural stuff, I would say. So yeah, I kind of avoid. Actually, now when I bike through Turkey, I was only 20 kilometers on the outskirts of Ankara, and I just like, oh, do I want to go into Ankara? I was like, nah, because getting into Istanbul is it's probably one of the hardest mission and most dangerous things I ever done. And I can imagine that Ankara is like pretty much the same. So I just skipped it, which many people probably would have gone in there, but for me it just felt like a big hassle.
I guess there's elements of like in a foreign country or something that there's elements to a city that's different. And if I was to think, say, of like a classical European city, you know, each one's got its own central square that and its ornate buildings and its culture and stuff, which is cool. But then at the end of the day, and this is my views personally, because I'm like you, Marielle, I would much prefer to be out in the country. I live in a small village in the mountains in France. You know,
Mm,
very, very quaint life, far away from the city hustle and bustle. Because ultimately, the cities to me become very much the same. They're just busy, they're full of people, sometimes full of pollution. There's shopping centres, and a shopping centre to me is the same regardless of where it is. I don't live to go shopping, but I do live to see sunrises, sunsets, mountains,
mm.
oceans, nature. And I imagine that's sort of what you're telling me as well.
Yeah, and just to like feel the wind blowing in your face is amazing. And I try to avoid big cities as much as I can. But then, when I last year when I biked from Japan to Indonesia, one of my only and biggest worries was when I landed in Tokyo in the airport, how to get in to Tokyo from the airport. And I've been worried, the whole summer. That was the only thing that worried me on the whole trip. Like, how will I make it? And then when I was there, it was one of the easiest things I ever experienced. It was like bike lane the whole way. It was super relaxed. And I was so surprised that in my head I had this picture that it was going to be mental and crazy because it's like the biggest city in the world.
It's like a mega metropolis.
Yeah, but it was like super easy. But then to get out of Tokyo, it took me like 5 days because it just felt like a massive suburb. It just continued red lights and stopping and yeah, so to get out of it, I mean, it was kind of easy. It just took very, very long time. It never ended.
The other point of cities is like biking through a city. It's stop, start. Sometimes there's bike infrastructure, sometimes there isn't. Sometimes you got to cross to the other side of the road. And
Yeah.
it's not efficient riding, is it? You know, it's one thing to travel slowly and go at a slow speed all day. That's one thing. But when you're stop starting, it's just, oh, there's no rhythm to it.
Now, especially also when it's like bigger cities, you kind of have to stop and read your map the whole time so you don't end up on the highway because it's like one turn and you can be on the totally wrong road. That happened to me in Toronto, and I was on the one of the biggest roads in Canada, like I don't know, 8 lanes or whatever it was. And I was not allowed to be there whatsoever. And it was like too late when I figured it out. I kind of had a feeling like, this doesn't feel right. And then suddenly I was just on it, and I had to get myself off the road. And because I looked at the map, and next like exit was like 30 kilometers away, and you're not allowed to be there with a bicycle. I'm like, oh my god, I need to get off this road. And then you have this. It was like a massive fence, like 3 meter fences the whole way, like under the road. But I was just like, okay, no matter what, I just need to go down there and try to get my bike over this fence. Like I don't know how it's gonna happen, and my bags and everything. And then I had to strap off the bags, and I walked down this massive hill, and then I'm coming down there, and then I see a police car parked just outside the fence under like a little bridge, and I'm like, hey guys, and I start screaming on them. and you could see like they didn't understand where the sound came from. And then they see me and they're coming over and like, girl, what are you doing in there? I'm like, yeah, just asking myself, like, I'm really sorry, but I ended up on this highway. They're like, yeah, you're definitely not allowed to be on that one. That's like one of the biggest ones in Canada. I'm like, yeah, I'm realizing, and trust me, I don't want to be here. I'm like, can you guys help me out? And then they had a key to a gate to this fence. Like, I can't even believe that it happened. So they let me out, and they're like, so where did you come from? I'm like, yeah, Vancouver. And they looked at me, they're like, but that's on the other side of Canada. I'm like, yeah. He's like, you've been going with this bike the whole way? And I'm like, yeah. And, we had a good little chat. And I said to them, give me a fine if you want, but yeah, I'm sorry. This was not by by purpose. And yeah, they let me go. So, I mean, I know how easily you can end up on the wrong road with just making like one wrong turn. And sometimes you can't just like go back. So,
100%. Although you were saying just a few moments ago, Istanbul was a city you had to navigate to. And I have heard from other guests on the show that it is just an absolute nightmare to travel into on a bike. Was that
yeah.
your experience as well?
Yeah, it was really, really hectic. It's just more that it's so much traffic, and you are on a highway when you are traveling into Istanbul, but you are allowed to be there. But it's so many exits all the time. So even if you're just gonna go straight and you have all these exits coming up, you have to be so careful, because if someone coming behind you and they're gonna take that exit, everything happens so quick. I was pretty stressed when I was going in, but I also heard from so many people that it is a hassle. That evening I slept really good, trust me, because it's more like mentally tiring that you have to focus so much the whole time. And when I'm biking, I always have a little back mirror. Like that's like I can't bike without a mirror. That's my most important thing, I think, on the bike. So I'm always sitting and looking what's happening kind of behind me. Yeah, getting into Istanbul, that's stressful. To get out, it's easier if you're coming like from Europe. To get in, it's hard, but to leave towards Asia, it's easier.
I've heard that. I think some people have even avoided it, and like I think you can take like a ferry maybe, and but I'm not sure.
I also heard that, yeah, people avoid it as much as they can, but I think it's more because it's dangerous. Like it's doable, like 100%, but it's just risky, I would say.
What would you say are the biggest risks of bike touring?
Is um,
Hmm.
I mean, if you asked me 3 years ago, I would say men, because that's what I'm like the most scared of, like men with bad attentions. Because in my world, I think like with animals, when people ask you like, oh, are you not scared when you're in your tent for, in the forest for animals and stuff? I'm like, nah, because if you are in the forest and if an animal want to hurt you, it's because you came in their way or they're feeling threatened. They would never just like attack to be cruel or like have a bad intention or being mean. While with humans, and like especially men, in this case, if they hurt you, it's not by accident that they're just like, oh, it just happened. It's because they have bad intentions and bad thoughts or like a bad mind or whatever. So before I would say, yeah, definitely like men, because I'm always have to be so aware about them and not be too friendly, not be too nice, and yeah, kind of, I don't know, keep a bit of distance. But then when me and my twin sister we biked from Norway down to Portugal, the first day we only biked 90 kilometers so far in the morning, and then she got hit by a house mobile, and that was in Sweden where we had good roads, yeah, and he came like 100 k's an hour, and that was her first tour. And before that, I never really like I didn't want to think too much about the traffic because I don't want to scare myself up and build up like a fear, because I think that's pretty easy if you're thinking too much that it's what can happen on the road like with the traffic. I think it can make it really hard for you to actually enjoy the biking. So before that, I never really did, but then when that happened, like after that, I was so aware, like I was so worried about her the whole time because I felt like I had a responsibility. Next 70 days we had together, I was always like, my biggest concern were like if she was safe with traffic, because now I've seen it happen myself. I had to have that bad experience. But before that, I was like more peaceful with it. But now I also do take the traffic more into the consideration when it comes to fear, to be honest with you.
In Australia, riding a bike, we learn very quickly to ride what we call ride defensively. You don't expect a car at an intersection to wait for you. You don't expect cars to look for you on the bike. You sort of do what you can in your scope of protection. For me, I guess my biggest fear with traffic is definitely what the car behind me is doing, because I can't control the
Yeah,
car behind me. I can ride slower towards an intersection if I think a car's not going to stop, but I can't do anything for the people that are behind me.
nah,
I can be visible and I can have lights on, but if someone's texting on their phone or something, then they're distracted and
yeah.
it's not going to be helpful.
We think that was actually what happened because we had like reflection vests on us. It was a clear day. It was a straight road. It was no trees, nothing. And like he just came and hit her like really hard. It took him like 500 meters before he even stopped. And then we think he's been on his phone, so he didn't pay attention, because otherwise you shouldn't have a driver license if you can't see two people with like reflection vests and stuff on.
We're going to get into the story about your twinster tour, as you call it, later. But before I move on, your sister was okay?
Yeah, I mean, she didn't broke any bones and she was alive, because I thought like this is it. Like I never been that scared in my life. I'm gonna be honest with you. But she was like bruised, like she was blue from start of her arm and the whole way down to her foot. And I can't even believe that she kept on biking and doing the tour, because this was like her dream to do it. I had to help her like getting dressed and fixing the base camps and stuff. The first week she was pretty bruised up.
I've heard that twins have a deep, deep connection. So I imagine for you it was nothing to help your sister out, but I imagine sharing an experience like that would bring you even closer, if it's possible, together as well.
Yeah, we always been like really, really close. It was just really shocking, especially because she has two kids as well. Like, yeah, that was a tough moment. I mean, now we can joke about it, and because she just signed up for what you call like a will.
Yeah, yeah, a will, as in when she passes away.
Yeah, now I have the word. Like day before she left, her husband made a life insurance on her, yeah, if something happens. So then we were joking that like maybe he arranged it all so he was gonna make some money. We just like joking about it, and then yeah, but he didn't succeed. And also like 'cause I made a will like that if something happens to me, everything goes to my twin sister. And then we also said like yeah, and maybe this guy he wanted to hit me, and but then he took the wrong one, and yeah, we were just like we just been making a lot of jokes.
Are you identical twins?
No, we are two egg twins.
Okay. You probably look very similar though, right?
Exactly the same. We actually had the same clothes on us that day, which was pretty silly, I guess, but that was our rain clothes.
I need to rewind you back, Marielle, because we've had so many amazing snippets of so many parts of your tours. But I actually want to rewind you back to where it first all started. And, we've heard insights about how the outdoors has featured in your life really heavily from when you were growing up, kid, as a child. You feel most energized when you're out there in nature. To you, it's a natural progression to make this decision to go bike touring. But I want to know, from someone who was, ice skating and snowboarding, why bike touring, and what gave you the idea to go on a bike tour in the first place?
Now, me and my childhood friend Frida, that I played soccer with, we were one day sitting and looking at in a newspaper, and it was an article about a woman that biked, I don't know, from Europe to China or something. I mean, we were not old when we looked at this. We were maybe like 13 or something. And we're like, oh, we should do this one day. And, we just like talked about it briefly. But then, yeah, when I got older, I kind of had this like, and I thought in my head, oh, it would be cool to do a bike tour, maybe like across America or something. Because I was always like fascinated about America when I was a kid. And then I just found this like Trans America Trail, and I started like reading on it. And then I asked Frida, my friend, in like maybe September 2016. I'm like, hey, do you want to go on a bike tour with me next autumn? And she's like, I'm not sure about work and da da da. I'm like, okay, but you know what? I'm gonna book my ticket, and if you wanna like join, you can always do like I going no matter what. So then that year passed, and then in April, then Frida was like, oh, but hey, I think I wanna join you. So we went to America, and we started on the East Coast and went towards the west coast. And that was our first tour, and we did everything wrong in the start. And we were just laughing about everything. We didn't have any fancy lycra, or we looked like two idiots on bikes. That was us, you know. And but we had the time of our life, and we were just like laughing, having just like amazing time. And we did like around 100 kilometers every day, so we did kind of smaller days, but it was just like perfect. And everyone we met, they were like, guys, you're going the wrong way, because we were going into winter, you know, and we didn't think about that when we started. And obviously we had headwind the whole time. And everyone we met just said like, you guys never gonna make it. And so we had everything against us. But I think we learned so much from that trip. And then we did make it in the end. I don't know, for me, that was like waking up this adventure feeling in me. Like I loved every second on that bike tour, and it was a good learning curve, I have to say.
Did you find you didn't want it to end?
Yeah,
You know, when you're living something where you are just in your element, you're enjoying, as you say, every second. As the end of that trip is coming closer and closer, did you find yourself almost wanting to slow it down?
yeah, me definitely. Frida, she was kind of happy when not happy that it was over, but she was like satisfied when she came over to the other side. And for me, I just felt like I wanna keep on going. So I actually biked from Oregon down to San Francisco on my own.
Yeah, so you went down the West Coast.
Yeah, so I did the whole West Coast, and then I took the bus down to Los Angeles. And then my mom, that was she like 65 at the time? She flew in to Los Angeles, and then we took a train down to San Diego, and then we biked back from San Diego up to San Francisco together. So we did like a little mom and daughter tour as well.
Oh my gosh, I love this. I absolutely love this. Was that the first time your mum's gone bike touring as well? I know that you said that you didn't have a car growing up, you used to bike everywhere, but the US was your first bike tour. So was that sort of her experience as well? And then you're having that experience with your mum. Wow.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. And also, I think it was so good for her, because before that, she was so worried about, how things worked, because it's so different when you are in a tour and experience it yourself, compared to if you're watching someone doing things, because then you're building up your own imagination how it is. But then when she was part of it, and she know how I'm thinking when I'm finding my place to put a base camp up, and she know exactly how things working. So after that tour, she's not worried at all. She knows like I have 100% control. And if something happens, it's not because I did like a bad decision, really. It's more like it was unlucky or accident or something. And I think for her also, because we used to do a smaller trips, like 30, 40, 50 kilometers together. But for her to also prove when you're 65 that you can do this, like, because we did around maybe 130 kilometers a day.
Wow.
And yeah, I think it was also a really cool experience for her to, first of all, also discover America, because she hasn't been there, and to do it on this way. So yeah, we had like a lovely time together. That was really, really amazing.
What would be one of your best memories from traveling across America then, whether it was with your mum or with Frida? Like, what stands out in your mind? If I was to say, what's the first thing you think about from that bike tour? What comes to mind?
Think that first of all with America is the variety. Just every state is like a new country, and it's just like the people are so interested in you. If you stop on a gas station, people come up and talk to you. They're really interested and really helpful, and people inviting you to the homes, into churches to stay, and it was very like welcoming. So like I think if you do like your first bike tour, I think Trans-American Trail, or like America in general, is like a pretty good place to start, because you feel pretty like safe, and you feel like you have a lot of support around you. So that was like a plus. And then I think the nature, like it's so many beautiful places, and also unexpected places, because many people they're talking about the nicest states to bike through there is like Colorado and Oregon, which was really beautiful. But for example, like I loved Montana. It was so like innocent and untouched, and yeah, this really beautiful nature as well. I think the variety in America, I think was one of the best things, and the people and the animals we saw as well.
What about after that? Because I sort of mentioned it in my introduction, Marielle. You've toured extensively. I know you've had pauses and breaks in between your trips, but you've done so many. I think if we were to tally up the distance, you'd have to be close to 3 times around the world. I mean, 29,000 kilometers is the around the world distance. I think, is it 42,000 kilometers is, the circumference of the equator or something? Like,
Yeah, I think it's like 40,000 is like around the equator, and I'm on like 89,000 kilometers at the moment. But then I heard some people say it's like 29, so I'm not really sure. But yeah, it's been adding up a few kilometers.
did you consciously make a decision to do what you're doing as you've done it now, like reflecting back, or like you finished that tour in the States? When did you decide that you were going to go on another big bike tour?
And I think it was the last couple of days I had with Frida before we were finished. I said to her, like, Frida, I love this. Like, this is how I want to see the world. I want to keep on biking. Because for me, it was, I don't know, it was like a pure love. Like, I felt like I find kind of my element almost. And I always loved to traveling. This way of traveling gives you such a bigger freedom, to see what you want whenever you want. When I flew back to Sweden after that tour, I knew, like, okay, I started to look straight away into next thing. And I kind of also like to challenge myself a little bit. Like, I like to have these big missions. And then I was like, should I cross Australia on a bicycle? And then I thought, that's a little bit short, because I don't remember how many kilometers it is to cross Australia, if it's like 7,000 or something.
Well, I think it depends. Like if you're Perth to Sydney, I think it might be around 5.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends. There's so many ways that you could do it. It's a big country and it's not a small distance, but I can understand what you mean.
Yeah. And then I was like, maybe I should bike around Australia. And then I looked into that, and it was really hard to find any information about biking around Australia. Like, I tried to find on YouTube. It's not many people. I mean, maybe there is many people that done it, but it's not really documented. So I didn't really know too much about it. But so that was my second tour then that I planned, and that was like the year after. And for me, like, I know some people, they love going away for like 2 years, 3 years, and biking around the world, and things. And everyone is different, so there's nothing wrong, nothing right. But for me, I like to do one bigger tour every year from like maybe September to December, because then between I have so much other stuff and passions in life. I want to enjoy snowboarding and cross country skiing, and hang out with family and friends, and go surfing. Yeah, I love surfing, so I need to squeeze in a few months of surf every year as well, and then also work.
I hope you had some great surf in Australia because it's a country known for its good surf beaches.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in Australia a few times, and I've not been like super lucky with the surf. I had a few good ones, but I mean, it's definitely potential. And when you're in South Australia and stuff like that, and I mean, you have like lonely beaches and like perfect waves in front of you, but there, I wouldn't go out on my own. Like, I need to have like a local that knows the area, and with the sharks and with the waters, like, there is like some serious, yeah, waves, I would say.
Hey there, listeners. Are you tuning in and getting some inspiration for your own bike adventures? Well, here's a shout out to Old Man Mountain, who are supporting the podcast. Whether you're preparing for a weekend bikepacking trip or looking to embark on a longer distance bike tour across continents, to everything in between, Old Man Mountain has a rack solution to fit your bike and suit your adventure. On their website, you will find their handy fit calculator, which will help you choose the ideal rack for your bike. Head over to oldmanmountain.com and get ready to hit the road fully equipped. Okay, back to the episode. Obviously, I'm an Aussie and I'm extremely biased, but I would say Australia has some of the best beaches in the world. I honestly believe that, just purely. And I think we're so spoilt, we don't realise it ourselves sometimes. We're just so lucky we have, like you were saying, abandoned beaches almost. Like, you can be the only
Mm,
person on the most pristine, white, sandy beach with the most beautiful, pure colour water all around you.
yeah.
And these are found all across Australia.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Like, I think Australia is an amazing country. so interesting and massive. It's massive. I have to say that's like one of the words I have to explain Australia with. It's so big.
Yeah, I mean, when you were saying you thought it was too small to just go across it, so you went around it, like that's 16,000 kilometers around that Australia, I think.
Yeah, I included Tasmania as well, so I went a little lap around Tasmania.
Oh, and Tasmania's beautiful.
Yeah, it was really nice, and I made it like an old seasoner friend since I worked in Austria for winter seasons. So that was also fun to meet up and yeah, to let him show me his part of Tasmania, and that was really cool.
Where did you start and finish your circumference of Australia then?
Okay, so this is a pretty interesting story because I flew into Darwin and then I was gonna go anti-clockwise towards like Perth. And my Australian friends, they were like, "Oh, are you ready for the heat?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I should be ready," but I wasn't ready, So I started from Darwin and I was going down to Catherine. I don't remember exactly the distance. I think it was like it's maybe 450 kilometers or something. It was supposed to be like 3 days riding. Those 3 days, I had three bad heat strokes, like really bad. I couldn't even talk. Like my mom is a nurse, and I called her one afternoon, and I'm like, "Mom, I can't talk." And she, like, them, they got really nervous. I didn't expect it to be that hot, and my body didn't expect it, and I drank too less, and I ate too less, and so then in the end, when I came to Catherine, I was like, okay, I can't handle this at the moment. So then I figured out I need to go more south and then starting the bike tour. So then I had hitchhike with this guy. This was also he was a really cool guy, but he used to be on crystal meth, he told me, and he works for the mine now. So we were driving like 1,000 kilometers, and then suddenly he just stops. He's like, this place, and then there is a road sign, and I'm like, oh, and it says like the place into Wolf Creek. And I heard from Australians before, you cannot watch this video, the movie Wolf Creek before you go to Australia. And they told me about it. So then this guy that is a little bit of like a crazy guy, he just stops at this sign, and I'm like thinking like, what is he gonna do with me now when I'm here at this sign? But he was really nice. But anyway, he dropped me off. I stayed at their like minor camp that night, and then I went to Broome the day after. So from Broome, that's when I started to bike, and I learned my lesson. So then I biked the whole way up to Cairns, which was I think 11,000 kilometers.
Wow.
And then when I came to Cairns,
This is how big your trip is that you could say, I biked to Cam, which was 11,000 kilometers, and it's not the end of the tour, listeners. Like, like that's amazing.
yeah, no, and then when I came there, it was, I think, January, and it started to get really, really hot up in the Northern Territory. So my friends, Australian friends, that are working up there, they start messaging me and calling me like, Marielle, you can't finish the lap because I still had 4,000 kilometer back to Broome. And they're like, you can't do it now. Like people dying up here, like in their cars because they have problem with their motors and not enough with water, and like the tires are melting on the cars. So then I realized, okay, I'm a little bit too late, and it felt a little bit frustrating. But then when you are on the road, you just sometimes have to be flexible and change your plans. So then I thought, okay, but then I fly to New Zealand. So then I flew to New Zealand. I biked around North and South Island, and then I wanted to go back and finish the lap, but then it was still a little bit too hot up there. So then I flew to Indonesia, and then I stayed there surfing for 2 months, and then I went back to Cairns and I finished the lap with the 4,000 kilometers. In one way, it hurts a little bit that it was not like in one go, but that's just more for my self-esteem and confidence. But then safety first, and I guess you can probably do the whole lap around if you time it like perfectly with the weather in Australia, and if you do like really really big days. I mean, I did between 150 and 200 kilometers days, but if you are maybe bike packing light, and then you could do it. But yeah, I don't know. It was experience.
It's all relative, but 150 to 200 kilometer bike touring days, they're big days too. And look, I know that when you've got all day to ride, you know, 100 kilometers happens quickly in inverted brackets on a tour, and you can do day after day of that. But
Yeah.
150 to 200 kilometers, Marielle, they're not short days. You know, a short day to me is like 30
No.
kilometers, 50 kilometers, 80 kilometers maybe, but 150 to 200, you were doing big days. Australia is such a big continent. I don't know that you could do a circumference ride of Australia and not have to be disrupted by bad weather events somehow, somewhere. And whether that's, horrendous headwinds on the Nullarbor or trying to figure out how you're going to navigate with cyclones coming in up in the top end in the north or something like that. Like, there's going to be bad weather somewhere, right?
Yeah, and I think there is definitely like safety first, and listen to the local people. Like all my local friends, they give me advice because I mean, obviously, I didn't have a good clue myself when I arrived to Australia, and I never planned too much to my tours, which makes me, I don't know, end up in funny situations, I guess, sometimes because I'm just not like a planner when it comes to, I just want to take things as it comes. And
How much do you plan? Like, how many days in advance are you planning for? Like, it's one thing to not plan a tour in extreme detail and have a defined route, but do you have an idea from week to week where you're going to try to get to and things like that? Or how does someone who doesn't plan ride a big bike tour?
okay, I can tell you exactly how I do it. So normally, like around April, May, that's when I start to get the feeling like, where do I want to go next tour? And for example, this tour, I was supposed to bike across Africa. Because of war in Sudan and Eritrea and Ethiopia, it didn't, I had to change that plan. But anyway, so then I kind of measure from top of Egypt down to the southwest point, and like, okay, so it's 10,000 kilometers. And then I'm not like, okay, but then you always have to add maybe 2,000 kilometers more because you're not going like straight always. And then I'm thinking, I do 1,000 kilometers takes me 1 week normally. So then I know like, okay, so this gonna be 9 weeks biking, and then I can add a week or two on it. So then I kind of know how long it's gonna take me. And that's pretty much the plan I'm doing. So I kind of measure just the distance. Then I write down every country, and with the visa situation, like, okay, where do I need a visa? Where, so I kind of have a briefly idea where it's gonna be hassle or not along the road. And that's pretty much it, what I do when I plan my trip. And then I never Google any country. I never looking in. I just come to a country and I ask the local people, like, hey, if I'm going that direction, which road is the best, and what should I see, and not missing out. And that's more how I do it, and I always done. And I don't know, maybe I do miss out on some stuff from it, but it never gets like a plan anyway. So this is my way of traveling, and I always done this way.
But also, just think of the things that you never knew existed that you got to see because you didn't overplan something. I'm going to ask you the most impossible question to tell me about something like that. What's something completely unexpected you didn't know existed before and you happened to be able to see it on one of your tours?
I mean, it was just recently. I mean, that was not maybe like amazing thing, but I mean, yeah, it was amazing because it looks really beautiful. Like now when I biked, I was on my way to Cappadocia in Turkey from Istanbul. And then in the evening, like all the mountains around me, they were like striped in like orange and green, like really, really strong color. And I was like, what is this place? And then it got like more and more and more. And in the end, it looked like I was in some kind of cartoon land where it was just all these striped countries in really, really bright colors. I haven't heard about anyone talking about this place before or anything, but I think it was like an old kind of mine site, but like a really, really big one. And it just looked amazing. And all friends and like followers that saw it on social media, they were also like blown away, like, oh, what is this place, And I guess that like I never planned it, I didn't know it existed, but I just ended up in it. So that was pretty cool. And that's like still one of my favorite places because I pitched my tent there that night as well, and it was just like awesome to sit there on your own, like no tourists, nothing, and it was just beautiful.
I've seen examples of those type of striped coloured mountains in South America.
Yeah,
I didn't know they were in Turkey. Wow.
yeah, no, so it was yeah, it was really really cool and beautiful.
What a place to camp. You were talking at the start of the show, Marielle, how you love camping, that being in your tent feels like home to you. You're more at home in your tent sometimes than you could be in a hotel room. You must have so much immense experience of wild camping then. Does it feel like second nature to you? Do you have your own instincts in when you start searching and looking for a camp spot?
Yeah, but we kind of joked about it, me and my sister as well, like because when we did a Twinsta tour, I'm the one that always find the spots, and I have this like little feeling. It's almost like I sit there like, okay, this is good, but I feel it's gonna come something better along the road, and I know exactly when I find my little spot, and it's normally like pretty hidden behind bushes or like close to the water, or so no one can see me. And I would say I'm pretty good at finding the right spots. I mean, it's a few times when you end up in situations when you just kind of have to grab something. But most of the time, I'm pretty satisfied with my my places I find, and I can also zoom in, like in Google Maps, for example. If I know it's starting to get towards dark, I can zoom in, and then you can see if there is like beaches and bushes and trees. And that was a pretty cool thing last year in Malaysia. I did that. So I find this little beach. So I had to do like a few kilometers down to this beach. And when I come down there, it's a turtle sanctuary. And I didn't know about that.
Like big turtles, like big sea turtles?
Yeah, it was sea turtles. And then I asked this man, like, hey, can I put my tent here tonight? And then he's like, "Oh, but do you know about the turtles here?" I'm like, "No, what do you mean?" And then they had like a huge fenced area where they're actually saving the turtles. So when the turtle puts the egg in, they dig them up and they put them in this little like nest they have, like in the sand. And then he has numbers. It says like, okay, 98 turtles in this one and 45. So they have control. And then when they are born, they release them into the ocean because he said that like a lot of people come and dig up the egg and they take them from there. So then we're sitting and talking. And then after maybe like 20 minutes, he's like, Marielle, it's happening. You want to come and see the turtles now? And I was like, yeah, for sure. And we go there, and it was amazing to see all it. I think it was like 98 in this little nest that came up, and it was just like coming up from under. Yeah, it was one of the coolest things I ever seen, and that was so unexpected. I didn't know it. I just zoomed in, I saw a beach, and thought, okay, I see it's no houses around, so I'm gonna be pretty private. And then I ended up in this turtle experience, so that was cool.
How awesome.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Absolutely mega. Actually, I think it was while you were in Indonesia that I saw that this happened, because not everything that's on a bike tour is you just physically pedaling your bike. Like you are seeing places on foot sometimes and hiking places too. And I cannot remember where in Indonesia it was, but you did like a sunrise hike to the top of one of the volcanoes.
Yeah, I did two volcanoes. So first it was Bromo, which is an active volcano, and they are both placed in Java, on the island Java, and that was really like beautiful to just see this active volcano. Then I did the Aegean, which has the blue lava, and that was was it the day after or something? They're pretty near each other.
I saw the photos of the blue lava, but you need to describe what the blue lava is to listeners, because I have to admit, until I saw your photos, I had never heard of blue lava. I didn't even know what this phenomena was.
So it used to be on two places on the planet you could see it. It used to be in Iceland and then in Aegean. But then the Iceland, it's not happening anymore. It's something when the gas and the lava comes from underground, and then it has to meet a certain temperature, and then it becomes blue. You can only see it when it's dark. So you go there like 2 in the morning, you go down to the crater and you see it. And it's just pretty like fascinating to see it. It's literally like blue purple lava coming out. So I had a long biking day up to this volcano, and then I pitched my tent there, and then I went there in the morning and I saw this happening. So that was cool. I mean, I always stop, and if there is something to see when it comes to nature or animals, like I get off the bike and I explore it. So it's not like I'm going like crazy from A to B and don't take my time. Like I always take my time when it's things that interest me or excites me, then I wanna explore it.
I saw actually when you were in Norway, you saw the Northern Lights.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Was that the first time you've ever seen them, or have you seen them before?
No, because where I'm from as well, because I'm from northern part of Sweden, we do have northern lights as well. But up in Lofoten, which this area is, which is like first of all, Lofoten is one of the most beautiful places I ever biked. It's unreal. It's the nature is just amazing. And when I was there, I felt like New Zealand must have belonged to Norway, Lofoten one day, and it drifted away because it's like kind of same nature there. But yeah, it's really, really beautiful. But then also after we were done with Norway, because this was on the Twinsta tour, we flew to Iceland and we biked around Iceland. And then one night we pitched our tent close to the ocean. And we were in the tent, and I'm like, oh, I just have to go out and pee quick before I like fall asleep. And then I'm going out, and while I'm sitting, I just look up at the sky, and I just see the whole sky is moving. And then it happened again, and I didn't expect it. And I'm like, Annika, you have to come out and have a look. It's the Northern Light is on. And she's like, but I'm so tired. I'm like, Annika, you have to get out. And then she came out, and she's like, oh my god. So then we had like a unexpected Northern Light as well that I got to see. So yeah, I mean it's nice to see it on different places, and especially when it's like mountains around. It makes it really effectful, I would say.
I always think there's moments where Mother Nature makes us feel about the size of a tiny ant when something like that happens.
Yeah,
Speaking of tiny ants, Marielle, I think it was in Australia. Didn't you get invaded by tiny ants?
it was day 100, and my tent broke that later that day. So I was super excited because it was day 100, and I was in the outback. So I bought like cookies that day, to like celebrate. I don't know, in the evening.
Yeah.
And then I crawled into my tent like pretty early, like 7, 8 when it was getting dark. And then I had my bags in the end of my tent. And then I fall asleep. And when I was sleeping, I felt like, is it fire on my feet? Like, I felt like I was dreaming that I was like on fire. And then I woke up and I realized it's not a dream. Like, it felt like my feet were like burning and it was so painful. I'm like, what's going on? Like I tried to find the flashlight and then I looking down and then it's like a little highway of ants from the outside into my tent into this bag where I had the cookies. And then of course my feet was in the way too, because in Australia I only had like a little sarong on me because it was so hot when I was sleeping. And I freaked out. So then I had to get all the stuff out because it was no way you could sleep like that. So I had to take the mattress out and the sleeping bags and everything. And I couldn't get back into the tent. So I just slept on the mattress that night, out like under the sky. And then I still didn't really know what it was. And then I Googled it, and it seems like it's this fire ants that I never heard about before. And it can become pretty bad if you like allergic to them or like sensitive. So yeah.
Your tent broke that day as well, didn't it?
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. So then I abandoned the tent that night to sleep without it. And then in the morning when I take it down, then the post just broke. So yeah, I had to do some kind of MacGyver solutions the last, I think it was 9 days left because I couldn't find any place. I kind of had to hang it up, but it worked.
There's always a way, right?
Yeah. It's always a way. And it was a secondhand tent that I bought from Anne-Grete. She's a Danish woman. She's like probably 72 now and one of my biggest inspirations. And she's been bike touring all over the world.
Wow.
I mean, she's a bit fortunate because she's doing the more like luxury style because she do have a bit of better like financially. So she going with this like tours, but it's still like all credits to her because she's doing like massive days. And then when we were sitting talking before I did my first tour, she had this MSR tent, and she thought, oh, but you can buy it cheap. So I bought it, and that tent been through a lot of big tours before I had it, and I mean it still lasted me like 100 days. And also America we used it, so yeah, I mean it happens with tents. Even if it's good tents, after a while you just have to maybe change the poles and stuff. So
I want to know what it's been like for you then, Marielle, to have the experience of both biking with, other company, like whether it's your twin, whether it's your mum, whether it was Frida on that first tour in the US, to then also being biking on your own. While the element of it physically is the same and you're traveling and going to new places each and every day, it's a different experience when you're doing that on your own as opposed to sharing that with someone else. How have you found both experiences? Like, what do you enjoy from both of those? What do you not enjoy so much from both of those?
but it's funny you say that because I did think about that just the other day. But it's like pros and cons with both. To share everything you experience with someone is amazing. And like both Frida and my sister, I knew I go 100% along with. So I'm pretty picky, I think, like when it comes to deciding if I want to go with a person. I wouldn't just go with a random person. But for me, it's important that we can have fun together and laugh a lot and that we kind of want the same thing. if you are a city person and you want to experience big cities and all that and culture stuff, maybe I'm not the right person to go with because we're going to be too different. But if we had kind of the similar thought behind it, and then also the distance and pace thing, like I couldn't bike with someone that has a drone with him or her and like that need to stop all the time to take photos and to take breaks here and there. Like I don't know, like after a while when you bike on your own, you're getting into rhythm and like a pattern that works for you, which
Mm.
is like the positive thing with being on your own. You don't need to adapt to anyone else. You can just do your own thing. And like when I'm biking, I do big days, but it's not like I'm going fast. Like I keeping a like a pretty like decent pace, so like anyone could kind of like join me. It's not like I'm fast and furious and going crazy. It's just like I like to sit on my seat for many hours, and I like that when I'm on my own that I don't need to adjust that. Like I can do how I feel. In the evenings, it's nicer to have company, to talk with someone and experience thing. And if I see something beautiful or if something crazy happens, sometimes it's so hard to retell that for someone else and make them understand. And then it's nice to share it with someone. And now I can go back and I can talk with my sister and Frida about like funny memories or like my mom, that we experienced together. While some stuff I experience on my own, I just keep it for myself. I don't even tell people because I don't know how to explain it to make it like fair for someone else to understand like the width of it. Yeah, so I think I like both. It depends on what kind of tour I'm doing. Next year, I hope if the situation is better in Africa, then maybe I can cross Africa. And then I asked my twin sister again if she maybe want to join me. Because like Africa is a tour where I feel like I would like to have company.
If you were looking to do Africa, and I know there's uncertainties in areas in Africa right now, I guess there's the traditional Cairo to Cape Town route, for example, which really goes more on the east side of Africa. Would you ever consider the west coast of Africa?
Hey, awesome listeners! Are you loving what you're hearing on Seek Travel Ride? Do you want to keep the good vibes rolling? Then head over to our Buy Me a Coffee page and show your support for the podcast. Just a little virtual caffeine love can keep me brewing up the content which you adore. Click the link in the show notes, buy me a virtual coffee, and let's keep this podcast party going. Thanks, legends! Now back to the episode.
I kind of looked into it now when I realized I couldn't really do the whole East Coast as a first plan. But then it's pretty big sections on the West Coast too, where you can't really enter at the moment because of the same reasons. So then I was a little bit. So I did have it as a plan. I actually have a paper with me here about it all. Yeah, then I just felt like now it's not really the time for it. But and also for me, I'm gonna be honest with you and say like all the bike tours I've done before, I like when it's like easy, not so complicated. And also because when it comes to like these planning things, with visas and organizing things, I'm not good in it. Like I want it to just be like I just want to bike. I just want to get like through and I just want to be on my bicycle. And now, for example, I've been having a lot of issues with visas this trip, and you have to stop and you can't just like keep on going because you have to organize some things and go to embassies and you have to wait and the power is in someone else's hands, and I'm not a fan of it. And I think it's like sometimes it feels like overwhelming for me, like even to go to a country when I'm like, oh, then I need to organize this. It feels like really heavy for me. I don't know why, but it's just like that. And I think, yeah, with trips, I feel it's getting more and more like now when I've done so many countries, it's getting more complicated to the countries I come to. It's more about visas and political situations and stuff that you have to consider. And that's also with Africa a lot.
Speaking of visas and border crossings and, complexities on the road from that perspective, you very recently had a situation when you were going through Russia, which was definitely not a straightforward country to traverse through for that section. I was watching it all play out on your Instagram, but for our listeners who may not be aware of this story, I'd love you to tell us about your Russian experience and what happened from this perspective as well.
Yeah.
Only someone who's toured as extensively and for as long as you could have the mental resilience and problem-solving skills to get through this situation, I think.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, I went from Poland, from Gdansk down to Tbilisi to Georgia. And then I wanted to keep on going through like Kazakhstan and all the small stan countries and the whole way down to Sri Lanka. So that meant like you can't go through Azerbaijan and Iran at the moment. I mean, you can go through Iran, but at the moment it's pretty like sketchy. So then the only way to go into Kazakhstan was through Russia. So then I applied for an electronic visa and I biked over the mountains toward the Caucasus Mountains and into Russia. And I was so nervous first to get the visa to Russia because I know it's really hard. And the electronic visa is like 16 days. So then at the border, I was like worried, oh, what if they don't let me in? And now afterwards, I realized I shouldn't be worried about getting into the country, more about getting out of the country. So I got in and then I started to bike and I had like, I think it was 750 kilometers to the border of Kazakhstan and Russia. So I went through like Chechnya and then I didn't need to buy food my first couple of days because I stocked up pretty well here in Georgia. And I think it was day number 3, I done like 450 kilometers. I went into the grocery store and I couldn't use the card and I had sometimes a bit problems with it, but like I was like, okay, whatever, but I just find a shop tomorrow. And then the day after I realized again like it's not working. And then I start Googling it and then because of the sanction, because of the war with Ukraine and Russia, I knew it was sanctions, but I thought it was more like on a big company level, not like on private people level, that you can't use a card, you can't take any money out of the ATM, you can't even book a train ticket or flight ticket, you can't do anything with your card. And I didn't have cash with me because I used card my whole trip, so I didn't really think of it. And also I was so excited when I got my Russian visa that I was more just like, okay, I'm going. And then I realized I have 330 kilometers to the border of Kazakhstan. I'm like, okay, that's 2 days of riding. And I had 1.5 portion of pasta and 3 portion of oatmeal. And I think it was like 2 Snickers left. And when you do big days, you just need like energy. And I was like, okay, this is going to be tough, but I can probably make it. And then when I'm coming into Kazakhstan, I can use my card again or to get money out. So I pushed through and it's kind of like desert prairie area. So it's just like nothing for those 2 days. And I was lucky. So one Russian truck driver, he stopped and he gave me a little bit of Russian rubles and also like a military guy. And this was without me even asking. Like one guy, he literally just stopped and, hey, here you have some money. So I could buy a few bananas and a few Snickers more. But so then anyway, I came to the border in the evening and then I was like super happy and excited. I'm like, yes, I made it. And then the Russian border police, he looked on my passport and then he's like, visa. And I gave him like a copy of the electronic visa that I printed out. And he's like, electronic visa, нет. Like, no. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, here you have to have the proper visa. You cannot go with electronic visa. And I'm like, are you serious? And he's like, yeah, either you have to fly into Kazakhstan or you have to go back where you come from because that's one of the only borders you can go out with an electronic visa. And I was like, I was too hungry. I was too tired to like cry or nothing. And it's no purpose to talk against the Russian border police either. So I just I went back like 4 kilometers where I pitched my tent because I found like a nice little spot there. And I got back on social medias a little bit and told the story. And it was so nice to see all like friends, unknown people that was kind of, like they tried to help in any way they could. Like, hey, we can send you money, we can. And I'm like, no, money is not the problem. It's the problem I can't get the money out. And we tried to find like solutions. And then in the end, like when I realized I can't even buy myself a flight ticket, I couldn't even look for flights from Russia. It just don't let you on the searching site. And then I was like, okay, what should I do? Like, I just have to get back to where I came from. And then I was nervous about like, what if they don't let me out on the electronic visa? Because I start to Google it and it says like you can't leave like on any exit with the electronic visa. But then the day after, I just figured out like I need to hitchhike back, and that's my only way to do it. So then I find these like amazing Turkish guys because all the Russian truck drivers, no one wanted to take me in. They just said like police problem. So it feels like they probably get problems if they have a tourist in their truck. But then it was this like Turkish guys standing on like little rest stop, and I just told them the situation, like, yes, of course. And they had like an empty truck, so they just put my little bike in this massive truck, and then we had breakfast together, and they were so like nice and kind and respectful. I felt so safe, and I went back with them like 750 kilometers, and I slept in the truck. It was unreal. And I don't know, I'm just like so blessed, especially when you meet people like this. And as a girl, to first of all hitchhike, it's always going to be a bit dodgy and scary.
Mm.
But then when you have this like amazing positive experience, it just, I don't know, it makes my heart happy to meet these beautiful people. And then they dropped me off on the mountain in Georgia, and then I had to go back and try to reschedule all my plans.
Oh my goodness. Do you know that story is so wild? And you know, when you were saying at the border you were hungry, you were tired, no energy for crying, but you know, you can't argue with the border police. It is just a clear example of having to think on your feet and readjust your plans. I came across a quote from you, Marielle, which really sums, you know, this situation up perfectly, but also you and the wisdom of your touring knowledge that's now part of you perfectly. What you said was sometimes things don't go as planned, especially when you're on a bike tour, when you are often left at the mercy of fate. Since you can't control the weather, winds, visa requirements, political situations, and so on, you often need to be prepared to stay flexible, be solution oriented, and adjust your plans when things don't go as intended. Having to hitchhike with some Turkish guys in a truck 750 kilometers to go back into Georgia, that's such a perfect example of this.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when you have no money.
Yeah, no money as well.
Yeah, because that makes a difference. If you have money, you can always, like,
Get yourself out.
yeah, and like get help. Like, hey, if I pay you, can you drive me? Can you do this and that? But now you just have to rely on like nice people and yeah, kindness.
Proper kindness of strangers. It's often a question that I ask guests is to tell me about an interaction with a stranger where that has blown you away. And I mean, that's a perfect example of it, really, isn't it? Hey, jump in my truck, join us for 750 kilometers. Let us feed you as well.
Yeah. No, but they were just like amazing. But when you're talking about that as well, meeting strangers, I just have to tell you a little story that was really beautiful when I biked around Australia. It was not many bike touring people that you met, but then of course when you meet them, you stop and you talk. And then this was, I think it was between, oh, it doesn't matter. It was like, yeah, towards like Cairns, like in the middle of nowhere. Then I see this woman coming on a bicycle, like a touring bike, on the other side of the road. So then, of course, I went over to her side and we stopped talking. And she was 71 years old. She was from Germany. Don't remember her name, but she's been biking around the whole world. She wrote 4 books. But then, just before this tour, she found out that she had cancer, and it's like not like treatable. So she's not gonna like survive this cancer. She had a dream, and that was to bike around Australia. And the doctors, Germans can be pretty like squared. And he was like, "Oh no, you cannot go. You have to stay home. Like you have to cancel this trip, and we have to give you treatment, blah blah blah." And then she looked at him and she just said like, "No, I'm not doing that. Like I gonna do my tour." He's like, "Yeah, but then you can't get the treatment." And she's like, "It doesn't matter if I live like not that long, but I do what I love." And he got a bit like upset with her, like the doctor. But then she promised to, in every like bigger town she came to, like to Darwin and Cairns or whatever, she would go to the hospital and she would take blood tests, and send to him so he knew like how it was like processing. And then she told me that now she's been, I think she was a bit more than half through like around Australia when I met her. And then she's been going to all these hospitals and taking the test, and her values was so much better than when she started this trip.
Wow.
So like that kind of like just shows, how sometimes when you do what makes you happy in life, maybe it doesn't save her life, but it didn't make it worse. And like it was more like her body was like blooming from it. And I was just so touched by this story, and also to see this woman in her age doing this thing, and it was so like inspirational. And as she said, she's like, yeah, I don't stay in my tent so often. Like it's more when I have to. I do it a little bit more luxury now. I stay in hotels or places, and I do maybe a bit shorter days. But she did what she loved, and she like were catching her dreams. And I think that was like pretty touching to see and to hear. And I'm just sad that I didn't like kind of wrote down her name or something, because it would have been interesting to see how she's like doing. But no matter what, I know that she at least did what she loved.
It's probably something you've thought about quite often, I imagine.
Yeah, she's like with me like really often, and also like the inspiration, like when people complaining and you just see this like older woman just doing her thing, and I'm like, wow, that's so cool.
Oh, yeah, power to you, sister. That's awesome, isn't it? I love it. I have to ask, we talk about happy times on the road, unexpected, amazing moments of nature, being able to see examples of what you can do and what your body can achieve, where you can go, the distances you can travel. It also goes to say not every day on a bike tour is, blue skies, sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. Like there are some tough days on a bike tour as well where you're probably not feeling the happy emotions as much. Have you experienced that on your tour in terms of like, have you ever had moments where you've doubted or just not wanted to keep going on a certain tour before, or where the situations become overwhelming, you've had to take time out from it?
I gotta be 100% honest with you. And so far, I never had the feeling when I'm on the roads that like, oh shit, I don't want to do this anymore. I had enough, or I never had that. And that's kind of weird. I mean, I had things happening in my life that's been like heavy and hard, but I kind of processed it while I'm bike touring. Maybe it's strange, but I always have this like excitement. Every morning I'm waking up, I'm just so keen to keep on going, and it doesn't matter if it's like bad weather or anything. Like I never had that feeling, and I think that's also why I love what I'm doing and like what makes me going. But then, for example, when I backed from Barcelona to down to Turkey to Antalya a few years ago, I just lost my like best friend Max, and he was like a brother to me, and he just passed away like a month before I left in an accident. And I was sitting crying every day on that bike, but I also like I had time to, think about him, think about what happened, think about all the memories. So it's like even if you have hard time emotionally sometimes, I think it's maybe one of the better places you can be, because if you are home and you're working, maybe you don't take that time to process and go through that whole trauma. While on the bike, it's like it's almost like you're dealing with different subjects every day a little bit. Like, I mean, sometimes it's like happy subjects, sometimes it's hard and heavy. And I think about a lot of people I lost in life, like that died way too young. And I don't know, like I really do have a lot of time with these thoughts and with these people on the road. Sometimes I cry, sometimes I can feel anger that things happen to them. But it never affected me in any way that I feel like, oh no, shit, I don't want to do this, or I don't feel the motivation. Like it's never been like that. But yeah, I do have days when other things weight you down. That's for sure.
You did say something which is quite poignant for me, because bike touring and doing what you're doing, clearly, Marielle, it energizes you, because otherwise you wouldn't keep doing what you're doing. You wouldn't have spent the last 7, almost 8 years doing this, right? But also, it is something where you're giving yourself the gift of time to think as well, isn't it? So you're processing, like you were saying, you're thinking about loved ones, or you're processing the grief of losing a dear friend and stuff like that as well. And I often wonder, is that the biggest thing that you could gift yourself with a bike tour is the time to think and to process thoughts as well?
Yeah, because Tina, a good friend of mine, she's really into yoga, meditation, and stuff like that. And we talked about it. She's like, oh, but I said to her, like, oh, but Tina, I can't meditate. I just can't sit down. Like, it feels like my head is like somewhere else and meditate. But she's like, but Marielle, when you're on your bike, that's also meditation. And when she said this to me, because in my head, it's always been like, if you're meditating, you have to sit in this position and, like, having like a really ritual and something. And it never crossed my mind that you can kind of meditate in like a different way. So when we start talking about it, she's like, yeah, because probably when you sit there on your bike, first you think about things, but then sometimes it just like becomes kind of blank. And I'm like, yeah, it's exactly how it is. Because when I bike to, like, maybe every day I listen to maybe one or two podcasts and a little bit music if it's like uphill. But other than that, I don't listen to anything. I just listen to the nature and I'm thinking. And when she explained it like that, I realized like I'm actually meditating on my bike, and maybe that's why I love it so much, because it just like becomes peaceful, and I think it's good for my mind to be on the bike.
Yeah, it's sort of what puts you in your state of flow, moving meditation. And I think that is definitely a thing.
Yeah, and like you feel all the wind and the smells around you. It just becomes like a bigger, what do you say, experience in somehow, like that you do it on your bicycle. And I like that I do it without even being aware with things, because sometimes I can think it's annoying when I know, like, okay, at 4 o'clock I have to do this at the gym, or like I don't like when I know I have to be at the place at a certain time. And same with like, oh, I have to meditate every morning 15 minutes. But now it's like it just happens. I just do it without even knowing it.
It's part of your routine. It is just what you're doing, isn't it? I can
Yeah.
totally get that. And you're certainly not the first long distance bike traveler that I've spoken to who hates the idea of having to be constrained by rigid time frames and schedules as well. It's very rare for me to interview someone who's very rigid and very planned and very structured as to where they need to be and what they need to do.
Yeah.
Because as you say, I think the best thing you can pack into your panniers is flexibility, right? Because you have to be flexible because things will happen
Mm.
that you don't expect.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes it's annoying, especially for me, that I kind of have a goal, because I want to squeeze in like a lot of distance in a short amount of time so I can do all the other fun stuff in life between. But then sometimes when, like for now, for example, when my plan didn't really work out, it can be a bit annoying, and I'm like, but you can't really do anything about it. You just have to go with the flow and then try to find the best way around it. And yeah, so now this tour didn't ended up exactly like I wanted to, but it's everything has a reason for it. Yeah, and I think also with bike touring, you should never compare yourself to anyone else. If someone do 300 kilometers or 10 kilometers, whatever, like whatever that is good for yourself. If it's to sleep in hotels, you do that. If it's to sleep under the stars, you do that, or like in a tent. And I think like you just have to find like your own rhythm. Like, how do you want to pack your bike? Do you want to have heaps of stuff? Do you want to have a little bit lesser? Like, I think the key is to just find your own way, that makes you happy, because you don't do it for someone else, you do it for yourself. And if it's to just bike around in Europe and you do that, and it just comes to whatever satisfying you, that's what you should do. And yeah, not compare with anyone else, I think.
If you were to reflect back on your trip in America to how you're touring now, what is the biggest changes that you've noticed?
Um, is there any big changes? I think I have pretty much the same mindset about things. I mean, of course, I'm more like aware with things, and I mean, I learned a lot, but I still have the same kind of bike setup. I still actually using a lot of the same clothes that I used when I crossed America. Like, and also, I'm gonna tell you, before I did 1.5 lap around the world with my old bicycle, and that was also like I wanted to prove for people, like, you don't need to make it like a expensive, like materialistic sport, not sport, but like activity. So I used that bike and I just serviced it like well. So I think like you don't need to buy like a new expensive bike every year. You can have the same bike as long as you're taking care of your stuff. And also when it comes to tent and maybe clothes, maybe it's better to spend a little bit more and have quality that lasts you for long than to buy something cheap that it's not gonna keep you warm or dry or whatever. So I think I've been going with the same kind of stuff almost the whole tours. And if I change mindset thinking, no, but I mean it's more about humans, how we are. That's been like a big impact on me. And especially when I came in to Sydney, sometimes I get scared of being like a human, and I'm a bit ashamed how we act and how we think and how we are. Because, for example, in Sydney, I just felt like everyone is a bit like robots. Like in the morning, it's on the subway, everyone is on the phone. And you know, when you put the animal in a cage, it's like after a while, that animal is gonna be depressed and not feeling good because it's not in its right environment. And the same is like with humans, because we force this animal to sit in this cage. But humans, we are so stupid, so we're paying for our own cage. So we say, for example, in Sydney or like expensive big towns, like we're paying for this little room or this little flat, and we have to work so hard to pay the rent in this flat. Every day we're going to this work, and then when it's just like traffic around us, it's no trees or nature or animals around us anymore, and it's just all the sound of the big city and traffic. And then we're sitting there and we're thinking why we're not happy and why we're depressed. It's like because we put ourselves in a super expensive cage, we are not really where we belong to be. Like in the end of the day, we were all born to be outdoor in the nature. So sometimes it scares me a little bit, the focus on humans, that we're kind of losing it a little bit. Like it's about all this materialistic stuff and to have a nicer car, nicer phone, and better this and that. And sometimes I just want to like scream, like stop, like where are we going, you know? And where is our focus nowadays? What about just enjoying the present and like the people we have around us, and or the beauty we have around us? And I don't know, human scares me. Like everything goes so fast, and especially in big towns, I always feel this. Then I'm getting like scared. Where are we going? And it feels almost like humans, we created this like fake world, you know, with like big cities and stuff and what's going on in there, that we almost lose the real focus, in my opinion. But yeah, everyone is different.
Mm. If you were to give someone who's thinking about taking a bike tour advice, and they're thinking about it, and whether it's a 3-month tour, whether it's a 3-week tour, whatever, if you were to advise someone who's thinking about it but maybe not sure about whether to try it or not, what would you tell them? What would your advice be?
Yeah, but first of all, maybe start to do it with someone, because then at least if you are with someone in the start, like I was with Frida, then you feel more security and you have someone to share the problems with that comes along the road or whatever. So I think that could be a good thing, and a person that you feel like you will have fun with and feeling good and safe with. And then also second question is more like, okay, what do I want to explore? Do I want to see countryside or city life, or what do I want to do? And then figure out the place or the country that you want to see. I think it's good to maybe start with something smaller and maybe something easier. So maybe Google around a little bit what can seem to be interesting. Maybe not make a massive project the first tour you do, and then to get the right equipment. I think it's like pretty common that in the start of people they're bringing way too much stuff, so it gets really heavy. So maybe rather go like with smart clothing and food when it comes to the start, and then you figure out with the way. But what else advice? I mean, to have a mirror on your bicycle, I would definitely recommend that, because when you use the bike with that, it's a really good safety thing. To bring a sun cell charger so you can charge your mobile phone, and also maybe download apps when it comes to maps, so you get a bit comfortable with that before you're going, so you know how it's working. Maybe do a little few day rides where, like for example, a lot of people are using Komoot or Strava. I use Google as well. Sometimes, normally I kind of combine all the three different ones, so you can find, ways easier. So it's good to maybe learn to know the map apps before you go, so you feel confident in it. What else would be a good recommendation? Yeah, but also maybe talk to other people that do touring biking, and I guess you can find a lot on like Instagram or like biking groups, so you can get information in particular places where you want to go. I guess that's always the best way, like to get information, I would say.
I love that hot tip about figuring out how you're going to navigate and use it before you're actually on tour, so that that's an element that's not brand new to you when you're dealing with the whole newness of being on a bike and touring as well. I really, really like that.
Yeah, and maybe pitch up your tent in the garden and sleep in the tent for 1 or 2 nights and, try out your and stuff. And then what I reckon is, because I like to go as light as I can. And if you always have like wool underlayer, like pants, socks, and a sweater, and then you have a Primaloft jacket and good rain clothes that is like thin, that's gonna take you far, because then you have like the basic. Because with the wool, it's breathing as well, and it contains a lot of air, so it keeps you warm. So that means like you don't need to bring heaps of stuff to keep you warm, and then you can just like dress off when you're getting too hot, and to have good raining clothing that is like thin, because then you can kind of cope with any weather situation. And also when it comes to, I'm biking in sandals with clips under, because for example I had problems that my feet are swelling when I'm getting warm, and it gets really painful. It feels like the bones are breaking. So then if it's cold, I put a pair of wool socks inside. And then if it's raining, I have covers that I put outside, or I just go barefoot because it's drying. Because to have wet shoes and biking in that never dries in the tent, that can be a bit of a struggle and a problem, and it's gonna be really cold the day after. But so maybe like try your equipment before and figure out what kind of weather conditions is it gonna be where you're going, so you can pack the right amount of stuff. And then also when it comes to food and kitchen equipment, so you feel comfortable with cooking food along the road. And drinking water is also a thing. Like I drink the water almost in every country, which is working fine for me. But things like that you also have to check out before, so you know.
Marielle, I'm going to ask you to do something that I ask all my guests to do, and that is to tell me and the listeners about one day of your trip. It can be any day, it could be from any country, it can be a great day, it can be a hard day, it can be a day of unexpected moments, or a day where you met beautiful strangers. I don't care what it is, but I do want you to tell me and the listeners all about this day.
Okay, but then I can tell you when I was in Canada, and I just left Whistler and Pemberton, and this is in autumn. I think it was like maybe mid-September, and I always wanted to see a bear. That's been like my dream my whole life, but I never got to see them. We do have them in Sweden, even like around where my mom lives. I see like bear poop like often, but I never get to see them. So then I'm through this little like village, and the sun is shining. It's maybe like 3 in the afternoon, and then I live in the village, and then I see a black bear laying next to the street, like in the forest, and he's laying like with his head down. And I'm like, oh my god, like I thought it was a roadkill. So I thought I'm never gonna see a black bear this close. I stopped and I get off my bike, and then I'm walking down to this bear, and he's just laying there, and I could see his like fur is like moving in the wind. So I was like, oh, I want to touch the fur because it looks so cozy, and I want to feel how a bear feels. So I'm filming this whole little thing when it happens. So I'm petting the bear, and it's amazing, and it's really like warm. And I thought from the sun that it's probably like warm. And then I was like, oh, rest in peace, everyone. And then I sent this video to Steve, a guy that I was gonna stay with in Jasper National Park the days after. And then Steve just writes back like, Marielle, don't touch it. I'm like, oh, too late. And I didn't think more of it. And then I kept on biking, staying in my tent at night. And then the day after, I came to his place, and then he just says to me, Marielle, that's not a dead bear. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, that's a drunk bear. And I was like, what? He said, yeah, because here in the autumn, all the apples and down, they're falling down from the trees and they're fermented. So then the bears, they go into the towns and they eat it, and then they're passing out along the roads. And I thought he was joking with me. I'm like, are you serious? He's like, no, this is a drunk bear you pay.
Wow.
And I couldn't believe it. And I kind of felt stupid as well, for like being so like naive. And yeah, so I was petting a drunk black bear in Canada, and I have it on video, which is kind of good because I think otherwise people wouldn't even believe it happening.
I have no words for this. Whoa.
Yeah, no, so that was a pretty like interesting experience, I would say.
I would say so. I didn't know drunk bears were a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
That is incredible. Oh my gosh, listeners, could you just imagine? Probably good that you didn't know it was alive at the time, like you said. Could you just?
Yeah, God.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, can you imagine if he would have moved?
I was going to make a joke there and say, obviously, it was a sleepy drunk. You know, you can get sleepy drunk, happy drunk, angry drunk. It was a sleepy
Yeah.
drunk.
But you know, he probably thought it was nice. He was laying there like drunk, and someone is coming, scratching his fur, and he's like, "Oh, this is cozy."
The fact that it was warm and you thought it was the sunshine, I love that part the most.
Yeah,
Oh, Marielle, that's brilliant.
yeah.
Marielle, people are going to want to follow you and follow your stories because you're someone who keeps taking adventures, and our listeners are people who like following adventurers. How can they follow your story? How can they watch your journeys unfold?
I mean, I think the smartest thing is probably like Instagram. That's where I update the most, like almost daily, I would say, if I have like internet. And then it's the biking Viking, funny name, but I'm, you know, Sweden Viking, and I'm on the bike. And I do small videos on YouTube. It's nothing like special. It's just more for other bike touring people. If they want to go, for example, the bike around Australia, then they can go in and have a look to get a picture how it is. Because I felt like I couldn't find much information when I did that kind of trip. So then I started to just put these little videos together. It's not high quality or anything, but yeah, there, and that's also the biking Viking on YouTube.
Well, listeners, I'm going to provide links to both Marielle's Instagram and her YouTube channel. And hot tip, I have trawled through your YouTube channel, Marielle, and I really enjoyed learning so much about my own country that I didn't know. Hot tip listeners, definitely seek them out there, and I'll list them with links in the show notes so it's nice and easy for you as well. Marielle, as I look to wrap the show up, I have 3 short, sharp, sweet questions which I ask all of my guests. The first one's music related. You are a guest now, so you get to go on the Seek Travel Ride music playlist available on Apple and Spotify. And on that playlist is one song picked by every guest of Seek Travel Ride, which they've chosen to be the soundtrack for their adventures. You're a guest of the show now. What song are you going to choose?
Oh, okay. I mean, it's between two, but either like from Eddie Vedder, The Society. Yeah, because that's like, I don't know, I feel it's like so much me. And sometimes I just want to like leave the society and just get out there. So that's on my head often. And then otherwise, it's a Come on Camellia, which is like a really old song, but it always pops up in my head when I'm biking and it gets stuck with me. Like, it's so fun. Like, every tour is like, coming, you know, come on, come on, come on, Camellia, and then it's there, and I can't get rid of it. I don't even know who like made it, but it's just funny because it's not like a song I listen to, but it's always on my head.
I'm going to do you a favour. I love Society by Eddie Vedder, and I can't remember. Helen Dainty. Hi, Hells, a previous guest. She chose an Eddie Vedder song, and I can't remember if it was Society or not. But I'm going to add both of them anyway because I just love the story behind it. And I'm the host of the show, and I get to do that because I own the playlist.
You can do whatever you want.
Exactly. Final 2 questions. This one. You're given a choice one day and you could choose to ride all day on a very corrugated, bumpy, bone-jarring road, or alternatively, you can choose to ride all day into a very strong headwind. Which one are you going to choose?
Oh, I don't like any of them, to be honest with you, but I hate headwinds. Like, me and headwinds, it's my biggest enemy. So I take the bumpy road.
You're taking the bumpy road. Okay. I actually think I would choose headwind in this scenario because the bumpy road, you know, after 5 minutes, you sort of are okay, but all day on a bumpy road, oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. I think they both be horrible.
The amount of energy the headwind takes, like, it's like, you know, sometimes you're going mentally crazy when you can't do anything about it, and you just push so hard and you go nowhere. It's like you're going backward.
Where's the country you've had the worst headwinds?
I think it was in America. Then I blown off the road.
Whoa.
Yeah, like I couldn't stay on the road at all. So I think that must have been the worst one. Yeah.
The less said about that, the better. Okay, absolute final question, Marielle. You're a champion for sticking with me here. You're given a choice one day. You could choose to ride your bike for 4 hours on your own, or for 4 hours and you get to ride in the company of other people? Which one are you going to choose?
But then I would take with company if it's 4 hours. And yeah, definitely.
I suspect you'd be taking your sister along.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
First choice. I love it. I love it. Well, okay. 4 hours in the company of your sister. We'll put it out there.
Yeah.
Marielle, wow, what a trip it's been. And like I said, when someone's traveled so extensively like you have, it really feels like the most lightest of touches that we've been able to dive in and out of so many of your tours. But what struck me so much is just how incredible it has been for you to give yourself the gift of all these experiences. And the fact that you go there with an open mind, without things overplanned to the infinite detail, so many unexpected things coming your way, whether it's those multicolored mountains in Turkey to the unexpected northern lights that you managed to see because you had to go to the toilet before you went to sleep that night in Norway, to patting a drunk bear in Canada. You've had so many incredible experiences, and I know that there's going to be so many more ahead of you. All is which to say, thank you so, so much for sharing your story and experiences here with me and our listeners on the show for Seek Travel Ride.
Thank you. It's been heaps of fun, and I hope I can come back with more stories in the future.
Well, listeners, I hope that you absolutely enjoyed listening to Marielle talk about her experiences there. There's so many, so varied, and it's amazing to me to just think about all the places that she's actually been to. The idea that we were trying to, at one point in the show at the very start, work out how many laps around the world has she ridden? And it's all inconsequential, isn't it? Because ultimately, she's definitely not doing it for the stats, figures, number of country visited. She's definitely doing it for herself. It really struck me multiple times during the show just how much energy it's clear to me that Marielle takes from being out on the road day after day in her flow state of her own moving meditation there on the bike and just enjoying the happenstance of what's going to occur that day. All the unexpected moments, taking the good with the bad, and also once again showing us all that probably the biggest thing that you can pack into your panniers when you go on a bike adventure is flexibility. Thanks so much, Marielle, for sharing your story with us. It was an absolute treat. Listeners, are you enjoying tuning into these episodes of Seek Travel Ride each and every week? Do you love what I'm putting together for you on the show? Well, if you do me a massive favor, hit the link in the show notes and buy me a coffee. It's just a way to keep me virtually caffeinated and showing me a little bit of appreciation for these episodes which I'm producing to give you your own hit of inspiration and wanderlust to put towards your own bike tours. Put the link in the show notes. It's nice and easy. Buy me a coffee. And when you do, leave me a message and let me know what you're loving about the show. Until the next episode, I'm Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening. And that's a wrap on today's adventure. Before you head off, here's a final shout out to Old Man Mountain for supporting the podcast. If you're dreaming of a new bike adventure or mapping out your next big tour, you want to make sure your gear can keep up with you every pedal stroke of the way. Old Man Mountain racks are built to handle any terrain you choose, from rough off-road trails to smooth highways, giving you reliable, stable carrying power that frees you up to focus on your adventure. Check out their full range at oldmanmountain.com and start gearing up for wherever your next journey takes you.